Coming up next on Artifacts, we've got a Blockbuster of a show, starting off with an interview with one of the Blockbuster McKnight Film Fund winners.
Then I'll be taking a spiritual journey of sorts with 3 guests who will bring us their different perspectives on the arts and spirituality.
A good way to close on another year of Artifacts, I think.
Yep, and a good way for you to spend the next hour. Stay with us.
You know, Phil, I woke up this morning thinking it's hard to believe another year has passed and that we've done a whole year's worth of Artifact shows together.
Well, it's been a fun year, and we've had some great guests on the show. As a matter of fact, as of this very moment, we've had 298 great guests on Artifacts over the years.
And that means that our 299th and 300th guests will be Blue Kraning, who's one of the 4 Blockbuster McKnight Film Fund Award winners, and Christine Walker will also be with us. She administers the fund.
Well, then Nathan Muus will join me for a discussion about the Sami culture of northern Norway and how it compares with the artistry of Native Americans. And then my next guest, Salerno, recently went to Mexico looking for the connection between art and ritual, and we'll talk about that and some other things.
And then Phil will continue on his journey with Marliyn, who is the director of the Center for the Documentation of Places of Worship. She's also an architectural historian.
That's right. Now, the enticing conversation begins right after this look at a clip from The Man Inside, directed by Blue Kraning, one of those first recipients of the Blockbuster McKnight Film Fund Awards.
Hi everybody, I'm Janet Zahn, the coordinator of the Office of Film, Video and Recording for the City of Minneapolis. This is Blue Kraning, who is a filmmaker and a winner of one of the first Blockbuster McKnight Film Fund Awards. Welcome, Blue. And also Christine Walker is here, and she is the administrator of the fund.
Yes.
Welcome to you too, Christine.
Thank you.
Well, we have to talk a little bit about that clip that we just saw. I had the good fortune of watching a little bit more of this film. I didn't get to see the whole thing, but even in the short clip, there was such a mood created here and tension, and it's a very ominous feel through your lighting and your production design, et cetera. Tell us a little bit about this movie and the story.
Well, the story came out of a period of time that I spent in high school, actually, where I didn't go to school for about 2 weeks. My mom was out of town, and I just sort of hid out in our loft in New York City and got really lonely and sort of scatterbrained in New York City, you know. And it came out of this idea of how lonely you can be in a world, you know, where you're surrounded with people. You can still be very alone. And so I made this film about, this film that you just saw the clip of is about a recluse who doesn't go outside, who is still sort of a kid, and he plays cap gun games alone in his loft, his huge loft, and he's getting money out of his sort of savings, so he can go out and buy Fruit Loops and cap guns. And when he's in this apartment, a crack addict breaks in, who has a gun, who's sort of insane, and he has his first sort of interaction with a human being in a long time.
It's just an excellent film from what I could see. Again, not seeing the whole thing, but I'm sure had something to do with the fact that you got the award. And you used this film as part of your application. Christine, tell me a little bit about this thing.
Actually, when he put together a wonderful application, but he's also at a level that is sort of on the borderline between what the fund was really looking at. We're gearing the fund towards mid-career, quote-unquote, filmmakers, people who've maybe made that $25,000 feature-length film and need an extra boost to go forward. And Blue, well, he has great experience as a filmmaker, and he's gone to film school and has a great production crew. But when they saw his film, it just,
that was it.
5 minutes, he's got it. So it helped tremendously, and it's a beautiful film.
Oh, it really is. Tell me about a little bit more about the Film Fund. Who dreamed this up, and why is it here in Minnesota? This is the only place in the country that has something like this.
What crazy person. Well, actually, there are other countries that have funds like this.
But not in the U.S.
No, not in the United States,
Okay.
right. And so you look at Australia, and they have the Australian Film Commission, all this government support. And, Jane Campion has come out of that, Peter Weir. And so the idea has been kicked around throughout the states, but the Minnesota Film Board was really instrumental. Well, they were the ones who really got this going, and it's a lot to have the idea to put together a development fund, but you need money. And fortunately, Blockbuster Video of Minnesota approached the film board and said, we want to be involved in the arts community somehow, specifically the film arts community. What can we do? And it was just perfect timing. The film board suggested that they invest with this the development fund, and they came to the Independent Feature Project North. And what we do is we work with the local independent film community, nurturing filmmakers, and they asked us to administer the fund. And here we are someday.
Hey.
So it's great.
So, Blue, what do you think, what kind of a difference is this going to make for you that you are receiving these funds? It's what? How much?
Well, it was,
Yeah.
it's been
It's a
billed
long
as
story.
Yes.
three $25,000 awards plus other, film and other kinds of support. And when the panel met, and it was a rather lengthy, exhaustive review process that took place, when the national panel met, interviewed the 10 finalists, they couldn't narrow it down to 3. And we saw it as, hey, you're giving us 4 filmmakers who have a lot of promise, 4 filmmakers to invest in. And so as an executive committee, we decided to just go with the 4. But that means that we divided the $75,000 amongst the 4.
Okay. All right.
So it's the first year, and we're still learning
Sure.
what to do. So.
Sure. So how's it going to change things for you?
It's going to help immensely. I mean, I think it already has. The money is going to help us develop our project and get a better script and possibly a better cast and be more prepared for the making of the film and for fundraising. It's going to, the idea, the fact that we have this sort of stamp of approval that this national panel said, these, not just the 4 winners, but also the 10 finalists, it's going to help local investors be interested. It'll help us find them and help us show them that we're legitimate and that this is a legitimate way to invest your money, as high risk as it is. And then it's also helped us get a lot of connections to Hollywood through IFP and through the Minnesota Film Board to people that are the Ice Block. Is it Ice Block? Ice Pack? I can never remember. It's Ice something.
Yeah.
To those people, and it's helped us immensely. I went to the IFFM, which is a big independent filmmaking convention, sales convention in New York, and everyone had heard about it. It's a bigger deal than I thought it was when I applied, and it's been a big help. And there's also the film stock and the processing. So
what do you think? I've lost my train of thought for just a moment. As a criteria, Christine, for applying, what were the criteria that people were using to apply for the fund?
Well, they had to be have had to have lived in Minnesota for a certain period of time, either 7 years or be a current resident of Minnesota. And so that opened it up to people who live in LA or New York, who these are people who call us all the time on the phone. They call the film board too and say, we hate LA, we just had another earthquake. We want to come back and make films there. And they've heard about the success of the filmmaking or the community here in terms of bringing in studio films, and so the buzz is going on about Minnesota and other places, and this was we made it so that it was open to them. They have to submit an extensive amount of materials, things that they'd have to do anyway if they were serious filmmakers, like budgeting plans, marketing plans, and script or treatment. And when the panelists met, they specifically looked at the artistic criteria, challenging, unique films, and priority was given to films that reflected the landscape of our region, because we want more Minnesota voices out there. And the other criteria was that they had to demonstrate an ability to produce. And that was that they showed that through their other work that they were serious, that they had put together a production team. So it's quite a lot that they have to prove to become a finalist, and certainly to become an award recipient.
Tell us about the film that you're going to make, this project, now that you will move forward with this support.
This is a film that I've been writing for the last 2.5 years. It's about a man from the city whose sort of city life falls apart, his working class life. He loses his family and his job, and his whole like American dream falls apart. And he says, "I'm just not going to do this anymore." And he takes off in his pickup truck and drives north up to the UP to try to live off the land and be a hermit, sort of like we've all wished we could do at some point. And once he gets up there, he finds that life isn't so easy or so idyllic in the woods, and also that the woods that he imagined, this sort of vast wilderness that you can just sort of live and be in, is gone, and that they're full of politics and laws and everyone's different ideas of how the woods should be treated and how animals should be treated. And he gets caught up in sort of an adventure between this poacher and this game warden, and it becomes about this battle over animals and the land. This game warden will let him live on his land as long as he'll kick all the hunters or anybody who comes on his land off, and he gets caught up in this battle.
Sounds good. Christine, you've read the script?
Yes, actually when the panelists were interviewing Blue and his producer, Paul Johnson, the panelists, 2 of them are from LA, they asked him, now, how are you going to shoot in snow? And finally, they were trying to answer the question, and Paul finally said, we're in Minnesota. That's what we do.
Yeah.
We shoot in snow.
Yeah.
So it was funny, but
Kind of a given.
it's a terrific
Professional snowshooters are
That's
here
right.
in this town.
That's right.
Yeah.
There were 3 other people that got the award, and we've talked about inviting the rest of the folks in as the year progresses and as people move through, and hopefully we'll keep updated on how your year is going, Blue.
Sure.
I wish you the best of luck.
Thank you.
It's going to be very exciting. Sounds like a good project. And Christine, for all your good work. And
thanks a lot.
I'm sure that will continue as the year moves on as well. So thanks for being with us.
Thank you.
Next up, an Artifacts Art Quote, followed by Phill and his first guest, Nathan Muus. Stay tuned.
G.K. Chesterton, always a pithy comment or two. My next guest, I'm really excited to have Nathan Muus on. He's the assistant editor of a magazine that I'm just getting familiar with, Baiki magazine, published here in South Minneapolis. And it deals with, among other things, the Sami people of northern Norway. Nathan, thanks for being on the show.
Oh, thanks, Phil.
Great, and
Great
I am
to
just
be here.
fascinated, as we were sitting down to get started here, you were showing us a variety of artifacts you've brought, you were talking a little bit about the history and some of the culture, and we're going to talk about all of that, but why don't you start grounding us with a little bit about who the Sami people are and where they are?
Okay. The Sami people are the indigenous people of northern Norway, Sweden, Finland, and a little bit of Russia, the Kola Peninsula of Russia.
Oh, okay.
And they're people, we are people who have been there for many thousands of years. There are petroglyphs and other evidences of our being up there in northern Scandinavia way before the Viking Age.
Right, so really
It
predates
came
that kind of more contemporary
Yeah.
modern stuff. Now you
Yes.
brought a map that maybe we can take a peek at too, and as we get over to look at that, why don't you just sort of walk us through what part of the world this is and
Okay.
re-describe that a little bit?
All right, what we're seeing here is a map of what's called Sapmi, which means Sami land, and some people know it as Lapland from their old National Geographics.
Yeah, and second grade for me, I
Second
remember
grade
that, that's right.
books. On the far left, we've got Norway, which is, you've got the brown showing the mountainous range between Norway and Sweden, and then of course Sweden, and then over a little further northern Finland, and then the Kola Peninsula of Russia. So that's the top of the world from
So they're very
Yeah.
northern people.
very northern. However, one of the stereotypes of the Sami, or as they're known as the Lapps, is that they all live above the Arctic Circle. And actually, a lot of Sami land and a lot of Samis live quite far down south into Norway and Sweden, as far down as like farther than Trondheim, if you know where that is. Røros in Norway, if you know where that is. It kind of dips just a little down into that big area of Norway and Sweden.
You're making one of our crew very happy because he was just over in Norway getting married, so I think he recognizes a lot of these places, so that's great. I
Well-
can't help but notice the jacket you're wearing. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, these are called gakti, the Sami clothing, and each town has its own pattern, and then each area especially has its own dialect of the Sami language, which is still a very vibrant living language today, which is very, we're happy to say. But then every town has a different pattern, so you can tell where somebody's from by their clothing. where
Okay, and
they're
the
from.
colors too are part of that identification?
Yeah, most of the clothing that the Sami wear, almost all of it, has the red, yellow, green, and blue, dark blue or black.
Oh, all right.
Um,
Sure. Well, what
although-
else did you bring here? You've got a variety of things here.
Okay, well, I should talk just a little more about the Sami. The Sami are known as the reindeer herders of Northern Europe, and the reindeer is the animal which is somewhat like with American Indian people here in North America, the buffalo and perhaps the caribou or deer. But the reindeer is the animal that Sami domesticated over some period of time, and still to this day there's a great industry really, and maybe 10% of the Sami people are still involved with reindeer herding. But from the reindeer we get the antlers, the bones, we make tools. We also make some of our clothing, for example, the boots, purses, even total winter jackets made with the reindeer. And then, of course, you've got the meat, you've got the milk. In other words, every part of the animal is used by the Sami people. Nothing is wasted in the old, traditional sense of the word. And in that way, we have a similarity with other indigenous groups like the Inuit and American Indian peoples. Let's see. Now this, for example, is a hat. This is a four winds hat. It's got four corners, and this is symbolic of the four directions. That is also part of the Sami worldview, or our beliefs. And but the hat also shows the four most predominant colors in our clothing, and and also shows how we've, got a little bit of, I guess you would say, practicality involved, because you can open up the hat, see, and stick your lunch or your money or something in there, and then, you stick that on, and you got your hands free for doing things.
Good move. That is efficient. Sure.
But like I said, it also has a reflection of the Sami nature religion and the old beliefs, which still are part of the way of life.
And as you mentioned the name of that, the Four Winds hat, of course, I thought of the connection here in Minneapolis with the Four Winds School down on Chicago Avenue.
Right.
Must be part also of another culture too. These cardinal directions.
Yeah. I think that that all across the top of the world, there are indigenous cultures, and all across Siberia, for example, there's many tribes of reindeer herding people with whom the Sami share a lot of very, very similar cultural elements, and they're reindeer herders as well.
Nathan, what else did you bring? I see something down there that is just fascinating to me. It's what I would think of as a drum or almost a tambourine of some sort.
Well, yeah, it's a drum, and the drum is a real sensitive topic with Native peoples, but the Sami drum is not used so much for musical performance per se. But it is used with the nature religion, and in curing.
Why don't you hold this just about like this, and maybe we can get a shot of that as you're talking.
When sometimes there is a big debate about this, the kind of pseudo shamanism and things that goes around, and the thing that I think that people who aren't aware or look at it is that I think a lot of what shamanism really is about is it's involved with a group of people of all who care for each other and work with each other, and it's about curing and healing, and about the cultural base of that people. It's not about someone getting a personal power and kind of like magic and that kind of stuff. It revolves around the community. So anyway, the drum is still important with the Sami people, although about 300 years ago, the Lutheran religion pretty much tried to wipe out the Sami.
Yeah, there's a little encounter there between the traditional culture and the Lutheran.
Right, and many of us, like myself, I did not grow up with Sami customs. I didn't, it was something that gradually the family admitted, okay, hey, we actually are Sami, and then we find our genealogy, and then so it was exciting when we really did, find out that we were indeed Sami.
When I understand too that some of the things you brought, I mean, you've picked up yourself in Sami land.
Yeah, some of the things are from Sami land. Yes, definitely. Well, all these are Sami made.
Right.
Yes.
You mentioned earlier, too, that you might be able to give us just a part of a song.
Yeah, I'll sing a song, and what this is a yoik. It's called a yoik, and the yoik is not like most kind of traditional singing, perhaps, although there might be some correlations with other traditional peoples, but the yoik is an expression, and it can be anywhere from something welcoming somebody or a group of people, or just an expression about a person or a place. So I'll do a little yoik.
Okay, that'd be great.
Let's see here. Okay. Yukla la la lu la 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 lukla la 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 lu la la lukla la la lu la 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 lukla la 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 lu la la lukla la la lu la 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 lukla la 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 lu la lukla la la lu la 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 lukla la 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 lu la.
Nathan, thank you. That was wonderful.
Sure.
Now we've got just a couple minutes left, and before we go, I want to make sure that people learn a little bit more about your magazine. It's Baiki, and what do you cover in it, and where can people get hold of it?
Okay, Baiki magazine is now almost 4 years old. Okay, this was started by Phill, along in association with some other people of Sami ancestry, Rudy Sally Johnson, Arden Johnson, Maya Humph, etc. But Faith was the real shaker and mover, and and it started out just a few people, you know, writing and doing things, and then connecting with people in Sami land, and them writing articles too. And now we've got about an 800 circulation, and what we're trying to do with the magazine, I think a lot, is there are about 30,000 descendants of Sami people in North America, and many of whom didn't know that they were Sami, and are finding out through their family roots and genealogy and oral stories in the family and things. So the magazine is working with people in Sapmi, trying to help connect up family connections and cultural traditions, and as well as being something that's a source for people who aren't Sami and are just real interested.
You bet.
And
I think you told me this will be essentially the December issue that's just coming out.
we try to be quarterly,
Okay.
and but what I would say is that the magazine comes out when it's ready.
All right.
And
it sounds like it's a keeper too. It's not something you'd probably just read and toss. I mean, something to hang on to.
oh, people get it. People get their magazine and
Yeah.
really spend some time looking through it. And it can be ordered through. We have a P.O. box now. P.O. Box 7431, Minneapolis, Minnesota 55407.
Okay.
And you can send $4 for a sample copy if you just want to, see what it's about and then decide if you want to subscribe. But it's all about, the connections of Sami people here and in Sami land, and a little genealogy, some history, some stories, and what's going on today. Some of the issues that they face there, the pollution and the cultural repression, and just some of those same things happen to Native people here.
Nathan, I thank you very much for sharing a little bit about the magazine and these wonderful things you brought in.
Thank you.
Appreciate having you on.
Thanks, Phil. It's great
Okay,
to come.
great.
Yeah.
Well, that was very interesting, and we'd like you to stay tuned right now. The crew from City Cable 34 went down to City Center to take a look at a holiday boutique that has an arts connection. Let's take a look, and we'll be right back. Well, we're at City Center on the Nicollet Mall in downtown Minneapolis in front of a store called Arts Angels. It's a holiday boutique that features a collaboration between the shopping center and about a dozen arts organizations here in the Twin Cities. Let's go on inside and take a look at what they're selling. Two of the many people that put this particular holiday boutique together are with me here, Lendra Kearns from the Guthrie and Larry Herkel, who's with Brookfield Development. That's the company that has this entire City Center shopping center. What do we have here at Arts Angels?
We have a tremendous variety of merchandise from a dozen different arts organizations around the city. We've got books like the wonderful Treasures of Venice book from the Institute of Art, and a wonderful collection of fiction and short stories and poetry from a number of the smaller presses like Milkweed Editions and Grey Wolf Press are part of the gift. We've got a ton of t-shirts from various organizations. Bah Humbug ones from the Guthrie, and June Loon shirts and the Institute of Art one. Wonderful kid stuff, great silk frogs, and some really wonderful educational videos from Illusion Theater, Just Say No videos, which are a tremendous gift for parents to give to small children. There's Arts Angels gift baskets with a variety of merchandise. There's a great collection of coffee cups, and of course from the Guthrie, we've got all of the Christmas Carol merchandise, the Scrooge figurines and pop-up boxes and Christmas Carol ornaments and coffee mugs and mini books and big books. And then we have a little section of merchandise that's sort of handcrafted angel stuff, which seems somewhat appropriate considering the name of the shop.
That's right. Well, Larry, tell me, what was it that led Brookfield to do something like this? Because you are partners in this.
We are. We thought it was an excellent opportunity to create a partnership between public and private in creating a win-win situation for both of us. Brookfield wins because we have a vacant space that we have merchandise that's not offered or duplicated anywhere else. It really creates some vitality for the shopping center. And the arts organizations win because they get to increase their visibility and at the same time sell some merchandise. So we really thought it was an excellent opportunity, and we're excited to be a part of this.
Well, to me, it sounds like a great partnership between the strong cultural community here in the Twin Cities and Brookfield, which has got a great shopping center in downtown. Well, there's a lot of interesting stuff at that particular store, and I really recommend people go down there. It's a nice way to support the arts, and I think it's a nice partnership, as people mentioned in that piece. And thanks to the crew for going down there and doing a good job. My next guest is Sal Salerno, who, for purposes of this interview, I'm going to describe as a writer and photographer, but he wears many hats. He's a very talented gentleman. And we're going to explore with him some of the different parts of the world that he's gone to research, broadly speaking, some arts or ritual and spirituality things. So Sal, thank you for being on the show.
Thanks.
Nice
for
to have you
having
here.
me on.
And knowing very little about your work, maybe we could just start at the real basics. What are some of the inquiries you've been making?
Well, generally I've been very interested in the subject of the relationship of spirituality to art. And so my travels have basically taken me to places to try to take a look at that relationship. And the places I've traveled to have been my grandfather's village, which is in San Fratello, Sicily. And I went there for something that's called the Festa dei Giudei, which is an Easter celebration that occurs there yearly and has an extremely long history that probably goes back before the time of the Greeks.
Wow.
And the other places that I traveled to were Mexico City and also Oaxaca. And there I went to two different fiestas, one for the Virgin of Guadalupe and the other one for the Virgin of Soledad.
Fascinating. And you go both as a photographer
And a writer.
and
yeah.
a writer.
Right.
And what are the outcomes of these visits that you make?
Well, these were basically both done under travel study grants. So they were things that allowed me, I guess, the opportunity to learn more about both of these celebrations, and I'm now grappling with a form to try to put them into.
Oh, okay.
That I guess would help people understand more. I hate to use the word function, but let's say the relationship between art and spirituality.
Great. Well, that's a fascinating subject to me as well.
And a complex one, I might add.
And we'll never get enough time on this show, but maybe just as an introduction. You mentioned Sicily with the obvious family connection.
Right.
What was your motivation to go to Mexico and Oaxaca?
Okay. Well, a lot of this work for me started, I guess, many years ago. And it, I guess, was born out of work that I did at the Higher Education Consortium for Urban Affairs, some of the work that I did with the Alliance for Cultural Democracy and the Science Museum. And some of it centered around the quincentenary.
Yes.
And kind of rethinking the invasion of the Americas, so to speak, and the role of Spain. And in the course of doing this research, I also discovered that Italy was also, southern Italy, the Kingdom of the Two Sicilies, was also invaded and conquered by Spain in the same century that Columbus made his voyage to
so
to
this
America.
was also part of the sort of the colonial impulse of
Right.
Spain. It wasn't
Yes.
simply to the west,
Yeah.
but to the east as well.
Exactly.
I did not know that.
And so my initial interest was through looking at the Black Madonna and seeing ways in which, you know, dark virgins were something that seemed to parallel conquests and were, I guess, a little acknowledged aspect of some of the impact of conquest. And this came basically through work that I was doing on desecration of sacred sites in Indian country. I was writing then for The Circle and News from Indian Country, and kind of looking at that and learning about that also from some Native American scholars, Vine DeLorean, Walter Echohawk, who were writing on the subject as well, and looking at some of the legal implications of, you know, why this is,
Right.
you know, why 60-odd sites in the United States are currently being desecrated by extractive industries. And that kind of piqued my interest to look more at the whole subject of spirituality as a way of trying to understand some of the consequences of conquest, and also as a way of kind of unpacking some of the complexities of the interaction between cultures.
Right.
And also that, in a sense, the spiritual, through the spiritual dimension, a lot of the history survives. And I think that's one of the important connections, at least that I see, that when you look at spiritual traditions, you often find through the art forms a way of remembering that moment when these two cultures collided.
Right.
And you can see in the I guess the enactment or the continued enactment of these festivals or fiestas,
Right.
Liturgical celebrations,
Rituals,
whatever you
very
want to call them,
interesting.
some way of remembering that moment.
Right.
And in my grandfather's village, for example, it's, as I mentioned earlier, it's really complex because it probably goes back to the time before the Greeks. And so you can see in one of the photos that I have that's labeled Judae, the complexity of the costumes, and just to kind of unpack some of what you might not be able to see, you know, behind this elaborate costume is a horsetail.
Oh.
And the shoes that people now wear are tennis shoes, but in the past they used to wear shoes that were made of unshorn sheepskin, which kind of goes back to the satyrs and Dionysian
Interesting.
forms of celebrating the arrival of spring.
Yes.
And as you look at other elements in these costumes, the embroidery is Arabic.
Yes.
The masks are things that probably arrived with Spain and I guess were used by the penitents. You can see that better in another slide, Processione, that we have here. And that one's a real startling image because when people see it, they're kind of reminded of the Klan.
Yes.
But it's actually, that costume comes from a Spanish tradition. And I remember just coming back from my trip, and I went to a wonderful exhibit at the Parts Gallery. And I saw another photographer that had been in Spain during Easter and had photographed Easter fiestas there, and it was the same costume. And so it was pretty startling.
So they're
to
in the
me.
Iberian Peninsula, but also very similar
In Sicily.
In Sicily.
Yeah.
Did you find any similarities, maybe marked similarities, with the Spanish influence in Oaxaca, or?
Well, the Catholicism,
The
definitely.
religion itself.
Yes, the religion itself, and you know, a lot of what I saw there, you know, was it was more connected to, I guess, more of the indigenous culture, and like there were many Aztec dancers that would dress in traditional costumes and danced inside the plaza. But you know, if you were walking in that plaza, at various moments you would be able to hear, you know, Gregorian chants and organ music at the same time. You would be able to hear, you know, drumming and the noise of the shells keeping
What an
time
admixture of cultures there. It must be fascinating to be there with a kind of a trained eye and ear as you've been.
Yeah, it definitely.
Well, you were
was.
kind enough to bring some images, which we've seen a couple. You've got a couple more to show us?
Yeah, well, one of them that I especially like shows the women of San Fratello kind of waiting for the festa to begin. And it begins, I guess, by them reenacting the Last Supper. And, but, you know, getting a little bit into the subject of the Judae, I'm a little hesitant because it's a long and complicated subject. And I think also kind of parallels the arrival of the Spanish, because both, well, paganism, Judaism, Muslim, Christian religions all were able to coexist on the island at that time, you know, prior to Spain. And then with the arrival of Spain and the Inquisition, of course,
things changed.
yes, things changed pretty
bit, yeah.
drastically. And so the idea of the Judae is that it translates into the feast of the Jews. And as the mayor told me when I interviewed him, that when the rest of the world is mourning Christ's death in San Fratello, it's celebrated. And so part of what the Judae do is they reenact what's in the Bible of the laughing Jews at the feet of the dying Christ.
Yeah.
But the interesting thing is that they also embody all of these earlier spiritual traditions. And that's, I guess, the really confusing piece of it. And I guess it shows the attempt of Catholicism, Christianity, to subvert the way that this particular holiday was observed by pagans that lived in San Fratello.
Fascinating. We've got a minute or less to go. Was there any other thing you wanted to share with us on another image, real briefly?
I'm trying to think. Oh yeah, I would just like probably to end with, I guess, the one of the trumpeteers, which shows like the kids kind of learning this tradition. And as I'm saying, I mean, it's probably one of the most unusual in all of Italy, and you know, a subject where, you know, people are continually looking into it and trying to understand its meaning. In this village, I guess, are, you know, still the earmarks of the older cultures, and you know, you can observe that kind of outside of the village.
Sal, so much more to talk about, but I thank you for sharing this. It's fascinating.
It's great to be
certainly in areas that I'm not familiar with. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Well, turning from that to, I guess, the beginning of a festival or a tradition that we've got started here in Minneapolis is the Holidazzle Parade. Those parades will be marching down Nicollet Mall throughout the month of December, and it's sort of a festival of lights, if you will, although it's more of a commercial orientation. We've got a beautiful commemorative poster that you could have for your very own. Now, I understand when they sell these, it costs about $8. If you're one of the first 5 callers to the City Cable 34 hotline, we'll send you one free. Now, that City Cable 34 hotline is 673-2234. So check it out, take a look at the poster, give us a call, leave your name and address, and we'll send you one if you're one of the first 5. I'll be right back with Dr. Marliyn Chiat in just a moment. So give us a call, 673-2234. The first 5 callers who leave their name and address will get a free poster. Now, my next guest is somebody that I've known kind of at a distance for a few years, and she has one of the most fascinating jobs, I think, in Minnesota, if not the country. Dr. Marliyn Chiat is the co-director of the Center for the Documentation of Places of Worship.
And preservation of places of worship.
Okay, you've got a long title, kind of like I do.
Yeah, right.
What the heck is this? It sounds wonderful.
Well, thank you. The Center for the Documentation and Preservation of Places of Worship is an affiliate of the National Conference of Christians and Jews, Minnesota Dakotas. And what we try to do is work with congregations not only in the state but actually throughout the nation, and helping them document the history of their places of worship, helping them deal with issues regarding the preservation of the building, the restoration of the building, the remodeling of the building, so that they do it in a fashion in which they're sensitive to the building's history and to the integrity of its architectural form, that they do it in a way that is economical for them, and we even try to help them find funds to do it.
Oh, that's good. Now, so those are kind of your mission goals, right?
Those are our mission goals, is really to educate people regarding the importance of these wonderful buildings. We see them as historical documents. We feel they have stories to tell, and we don't want to lose them.
And although this may not be exactly what we're going to look at today on this show, when I first met you, you mentioned that these are not always spaces or sites that are built. Sometimes this can be in a natural environment as well.
It can be a sacred space as well. Native Americans have amazing sacred spaces scattered throughout our state that we're aware of, but we also have to be sensitive about.
That's right. And you brought some literature that I'm just going to ask you to hold up so that people can actually visualize here. And you're based here in the Twin Cities.
We're based right in Butler Square in a wonderfully preserved building, appropriate place for us to be located. We have offices there, and should I give them our phone number if they'd like to call?
Please do if you'd like.
333-5365. Just ask for Marliyn, and we'll be glad to help you with your problems.
Well, that's great. Now, you've been kind enough to bring a number of slides, images now of some fascinating buildings. I think all of them, well, not all of them places of worship as such. There's 1 or 2 exceptions here.
No, they're all actually, yes.
There's the one I'm thinking of anyhow.
Okay.
Sort of the end game anyhow of worship. And why don't you just sort of take us on a travelogue, if you will. I think when our viewers see these, they're going to say, oh, I've driven by that, but they're not going to know what you know about these.
The stories behind them, and that's what makes these buildings so exciting and why we hope people will ask questions about them and visit them. We're going to begin, you know, when you think of Minneapolis and when you think of Minnesota, you think of Scandinavians naturally, and you think of Lutherans, and heaven only knows our countryside is blanketed with small little white clapboard, you know, Lutheran churches. Well, in Minneapolis, we have Central Lutheran Church, which is an amazing building for a Lutheran church, and the fact that it's quite monumental, it's Gothic in its style, and it calls itself the Cathedral Church of Lutherans in Minneapolis, which I find quite interesting. But why? And what we find is this building that was built in the 1920s was built for second-generation Scandinavians. These were already the children of the immigrants who were intermarrying. There were Norwegians intermarrying Swedes, and they were not comfortable going to the Swedish Lutheran Church or the Norwegian Lutheran Church or the Finnish Lutheran Church or the Danish Lutheran Church where that language was still being used. They wanted a church where English was used.
So this was a generational issue.
This was a generational issue and also was a rural-urban issue. These were youngsters who were moving from the farms, attracted by jobs in the city. The city was growing and expanding. So they were coming in from rural areas into the city. They wanted to maintain their identity and their faith, but they saw themselves as Americans, not as Swedish Americans or Norwegian Americans, but American Lutherans. And Central Lutheran Church was really built for that, to attract that group. It was built right in an area where there were a lot of young Lutherans moving into apartment buildings.
Right on the southern edge of downtown Minneapolis?
Right on the southern edge of downtown Minneapolis. The liturgy was always in English. It was never in one of the Scandinavian tongues. And there's another issue here. When we look at these buildings, think in terms of the fact that in the United States, we have a separation of church and state. So there's a competition for souls. And at the time that this building was built, you had St. Mary's, the Basilica, monumental building. You had Wesley Methodist, a monumental Methodist building. You had St. Mark's Episcopal, a monumental Episcopal building. The Lutherans had some competition.
Interesting point of view, that's right.
We have Central Lutheran Church.
And just to divert for a second, it's also a building that architecturally is beautiful and has this history. It's also a place in which a lot of art happens or is placed. I know the Compline services, for instance, over there are wonderful.
And not only art, but music. They have a wonderful organ, and they do some wonderful organ music. And you know, these buildings welcome people. Don't worry about it in terms of faith. Think of going and looking at them as architectural masterpieces. They're proud of them, rightfully so, and they will give you tours if you go there. But as I said, this is the image we have of Minnesota, is this kind of, Minneapolis is this kind of white bread Protestant, if you will, image. But if you look at this building, this is a magnificent building that was built in the 1880s. It's the first building built in the state of Minnesota in a Moorish style of architecture, which is rather exotic, if you think about it. It even has these incredible minarets. It looks like a mosque. It's not a mosque. It's the second synagogue built in the state of Minnesota. The congregation's name was Sherry Tobe, which means Gates of Goodness. It was built again by where the old Curtis and Leamington hotels, right on the edge of the downtown area, by a German-speaking Jewish community that was here in Minneapolis as early as the 1860s. And in 1881, they built this incredible building that really, the architect was Leroy Sutherland Buffington, who designed most of the buildings at the University of Minnesota.
Oh, interesting.
So this was a rather sophisticated Jewish community very early in our history of our city. And this building was built, destroyed by fire.
I was going to ask, it's obviously no longer extant.
Destroyed by fire in 1901. They built a second building that was totally nondescript. And then in 1928, they built a third building. Now we know the congregation is Temple Israel. It's the largest Reformed congregation in the upper Midwest. And they have this wonderful classical revival building facing Hennepin Avenue, where it's highly visible, over by 24th and Humboldt. And you look at the style of this building and you have to ask, why? You know, why going from that...
From mosques
from that very exotic, foreign, if you will, style, we suddenly are here with a very, what we like to think of as a very American style. You know, Washington, D.C., you know, very classical. Well, again, things just don't happen in architecture. There's a reason. 1928, I'm not sure if you're aware, but Minneapolis in the 1920s and 30s, up until the mid-1940s, had the unfortunate reputation of being the capital of anti-Semitism of the nation.
I'm familiar with the silver shirts and a lot of that bad history we have.
Yeah,
here.
and it was not a real comfortable time, particularly Minneapolis, for the Jewish people living here. But they still welcomed the fact that here in this city, in this nation, they did have the freedom to worship as they chose. So at this time, Lincoln Memorial in Washington had just been built and dedicated. Wonderful building, classical revival style. What did classical architecture illustrate? Athens, democracy, freedom. What did Lincoln illustrate? Emancipation of the slaves.
I'm afraid we've only got a few more minutes, but I want to keep moving through these different
let's go on.
images here.
We also have people from Eastern Europe here. What we're looking at here is St. Mary's Orthodox Cathedral. It was St. Mary's Russian Orthodox Cathedral. Wonderful example of Orthodox architecture. We can look at the interior where it's traditional with its iconostas, with the icons. Most of them imported from either Russia or Greece. And $1,000 was given to the congregation in 1904 by Tsar Nicholas to build this building.
Well, that was a nice connection to the immigrants, or emigrants, I suppose, from his point of view.
Yes, he gave them money so that they could continue their Orthodox faith in the New World.
And that building can still be seen.
Oh, it's still there, beautiful. Call them, they are proud of it. They'd love to have you see it. Quickly, we'll look at Lakewood Memorial Chapel, which is patterned after Hagia Sophia in Istanbul, which was Constantinople. Wonderful example of Byzantine architecture, built not by anybody from the Orthodox faith, but built by Yankees on Lakewood Cemetery. But the interior is famous for its beautiful mosaics. It's considered the most beautiful mosaic interior in the country. And what you said about this not being a place of worship, we know what it is. It's a crematorium.
That's right.
But it's still beautiful. And then just quickly, immigrants continue to come to our nation, continue to beautify our built environment. What we're looking at here is a Buddhist temple built by Vietnamese immigrants in Roseville. Actually, it was a church that they took over, transformed it with their own type of architecture, as we can see here.
And it's a striking image. I think it's just north of Highway 36, I think.
Right by Roseville, right beyond that area, Rosedale, to see it.
To look there and see this new contribution.
And they too, go inside, they've got this beautiful golden Buddha that they brought from Vietnam. They too would welcome you to come.
So they're open to a respectful visit.
Absolutely.
In that sense.
No pews in it. They've removed the pews. And it's got all of the traditional artifacts that one associates with the Buddhist faith. Again, enhancing all of our built environment by its being there. And if I can, on a kind of sensitive note, end with this image here. It's St. Boniface. It's a little German Roman Catholic church down in Hastings, Minnesota, whose life is threatened. There are those who want to have it demolished. It's in marvelous condition. Part of the history of the city of Hastings, part of the history of the state of Minnesota, German immigrants who came there to work in the lumber industry. And I'm showing this to you, and I'm going to end, if I can, with this quote. It's from an epitaph I found on a tombstone in a small cemetery outside Prairieville, Minnesota. Outside, there's a little Prairieville Methodist church. It says, "Look ye on high and see I am there, for when I am gone, I am gone." And I say the same thing regarding buildings like this, that once they're gone, we can't retrieve them, and that's what the center is trying to do.
Well, thank you so much for the quick tour and also the sentiment that you bring to it, because I absolutely agree that when you lose these, they're gone. You might have a document somewhere, but they're part of the fabric and the fiber of our individual lives and our communal lives.
And our communal lives, and they're the things that beautify our built environment. They're the oasis and the anchor and the stability in every neighborhood in which they are.
Well said. Marliyn, Chiat, thank you so much.
Well, thank you for inviting me.
Real pleasure. Well, thank you again. The Office of Film, Video, and Recording, that's Janet Zahn's shop here at the City of Minneapolis, just released the 1995 Economic Impact Study of the Minnesota film and video industry. Now here's our first official fascinating factoid regarding that study. Take a look. guest, Brooke Portman, who's the director of the Abondia Center, to talk about her new program, The Piano and the Song, along with singer Ruth McKenzie and arranger Tom Linker.
That should be really fun. Also, we're going to be talking about the 1995 economic impact study of the Minnesota film and video industry. Good news, good numbers. Should be interesting.
And that is news, and I'm looking forward to that segment, so thank you. Now, a note for those of you who have been watching us on Metro Cable Network Channel 6. This is probably our last show, at least for a while, on that channel. But for our good, loyal viewers on City Cable 34 in Minneapolis, we will still be on our home channel. So keep tuned in Minneapolis to City Cable 34.
That's right, we'll still be there. Coming up next, we have our events calendar.
And a long thank you to all the guests we've had on this year on Artifacts, as well as a thanks to our crew who've gone out and done some great location work. See you soon. I'm Phill Lindsay.
I'm Janet Zahn. Thanks for watching.